Hey, hey, hey! Welcome to the Oil Runners broadcast. This is Kristen All Love coming at you pre-recorded. Now, for going live, we need at least 1,000 subscribers, okay? So if you get to 1,000 subscribers, we'll start going live on YouTube and everywhere else, okay? So today we have a great person is Steve Stoliar. He worked with Groucho Marx. I mean, does anybody know about that? But so I'm gonna read the mini bio in his IMDb. I talked to him over the phone. He's a great guy, and he's quite funny. He's great. So Steve Stoliar is a writer, actor, and a producer who has penned episodes of Murder, She Wrote, Simon and Simon, and the new WKRP in Cincinnati, and Sliders, and among others. His voice work includes Frosty Returns. Oh, you're in the Super Bowl, Charlie Brown, and Oz Kids. Additionally, he has written, produced, and narrated a number of pop culture documentaries. He is the author of the bittersweet memoir Raised Eyebrows, My Years Inside Groucho's House, and has co-written the screen adaptation for Oren Moverman's film version of that book, which was announced in February of 2002. Steve was married to grip electrician gaffer Linda Field until her death in 2008. So if you would like to know more about him, he is on the IMDb. So Oil Runners Broadcast, if you would really like to be on the show, please email at oilrunnersservices@gmail.com. We are on YouTube, Kristen All Love, 3574. We're on Facebook, Oil Runners Broadcast, TikTok, Kristen All .love, Instagram, Kristen All Love. That's just one word. But let's keep it real, and please let's keep all of these trolls out of the works. Okay, we don't need the trolls coming at the people or at me or whatever it is. This page is for you to help you learn, inspire, grow, to be the best versions of yourselves. So let's not try to bully everybody. That's not what we're about here, okay? So here we go. We're going to let him in. Welcome in. How are you, Mr. Steve?
I am fine, Miss Christine, and you?
I'm doing well. Doing well. I
Good.
see you got my son that I want. I got the
Oh,
snow.
S-U-S-U-N. I thought you were
Yep.
accusing me of snatching a child.
Oh, nope, nope. Like, no, you snatched the sun, S-U-N, from Alaska.
A land of the midnight sun. Well,
Yep.
it's a trade-off because I miss the snow from my childhoods in St. Louis and from the few years I lived in New York in the 80s. And I miss the change of seasons. 72 and sunny gets kind of boring. And then things get shaken up with, well, literally with an earthquake or with torrential rains followed by a drought. So
Oh,
there is some variety to it, but I'll
just to
send
shake
you
it up a
some.
little bit.
Send me some snow, and I'll send you some sun.
Yeah, I'll definitely send you Frosty. I'll
Okay.
definitely do that.
Okay.
I'll make sure he gets there safe and sound, probably in a glass.
Well,
Okay, so everybody knows you by Groucho Marx.
well, I don't know if everybody knows me, but those who do probably associate me with Groucho Marx because I was really like the luckiest fan in the world. I would say I was an obsessive fan, but I didn't want to hurt him or marry him. I just wanted to shake his hand and thank him for all the laughs. And I managed to get pulled into being part of his household for the last 3 years of his life in the 1970s when I was a college student. And then I ended up writing a book about my experiences called Raised Eyebrows, My Years Inside Groucho's House. And Woody Allen said it was one of the best books about a show business icon he had ever read, which was awfully flattering. And it is currently being developed into a movie,
Oh, that's pretty cool.
which is ultra cool.
Yeah.
So we're working on the financing. It's challenging getting an independent film financed in these days of Marvel blockbusters and multi-million billion dollar openings and all that. But we've got some good people attached to it and a really strong desire to make it happen. But Groucho was, for those who aren't sure, was one of the four Marx brothers who were a team of comedians who were actually brothers. And they were in vaudeville in the early 1900s, and then they became Broadway stars in the 20s and movie stars in the 30s into the 40s. And then the team broke up, and Groucho went out on his own and starred on TV in what's considered a game show, but it really was more comedy than the game, called You Bet Your Life, which was on TV for 12 years in the 50s to the early 60s. So there was a game where Groucho would ask questions and people would answer, and if it was correct, they'd get money. But most people tuned in because of Groucho's clever conversation with these average people, because he would take what they'd say and turn it into wordplay or prying questions or something that would lead to laughter and interesting conversation, and then they would play a few minutes of the game itself.
So almost like a Steve Harvey when he does his game show kind of
Yeah,
things,
I
or
mean, Groucho was the first to do that, because before him, game shows were just game shows. You just had an announcer saying, and now you've got two right. If you get the next one right, you win. But there was no real personality or interaction with the contestants. It was just, what are you going to do with all that money? But they were pretty cardboard hosts. But Groucho, when he started doing the show first on radio, he was in his late 50s and had a lifetime of experience handling himself on the spot, and wordplay and silly expressions, or doing something silly like dancing around to break up the monotony. And a lot of intellectuals watched the show. It was sort of their guilty pleasure, because at the time people were saying, television is just an idiot box. It's chewing gum for the mind, just plunk yourself down and blah, blah, blah. But there were a lot of really bright literary intellectual people who made it a point to watch each week. And of course, there was no such thing as DVR or taping it and watching it later. So if you missed it, you missed it. And so
right?
you would tune in, I think it was Thursday nights, to watch him spar with the contestants. And they also like to play at home to see if, like when you watch Jeopardy and say, oh, I know that, call me.
Right. And then when you get up to the actual board, like, oh wait, I don't know the answer.
I was on a game show called Win Ben Stein's Money some years ago, and there is something to the fact that sitting at home on your couch with a mug of coffee and a sandwich and saying, oh, I know that was Robert Louis Stevenson, and standing there on a stage with an audience and microphone and lights and pressure. And also, when you use the buzzers, same thing with Jeopardy. If you're even slightly too soon, you're locked out. And if you're slightly too late, one of the other contestants will beat you to it. So it is its own skill to know when to press the plunger, and that took me a while to get the hang of it. So yes, it's different being in the studio. You know, people sit at home and go, "This guy's an idiot. He didn't know that that was Cincinnati, Ohio." But it's another thing when the camera's on you and the lights and the pressure and all that. But it was fun.
Oh, so I always wondered. I love the game shows, especially like Rob Hope. When he does it, Drew Carey now, and you know. So is it true that they pick the people like with the most enthusiastic um
They
out of
do
the
for
top?
most of them, which is why I never tried out for other shows because I cannot fake enthusiasm that they're going to give me a refrigerator. I can't jump up and down and clap. People clap, they clap when they spin the wheel, they clap when they say something. I mean, applause has totally lost any meaning. But yeah, they
Right.
like bright, young, fresh up. But on Jeopardy, you can get away with being a bookworm and kind of dull. And on Ben Stein's Money, the contestants for that weren't the ones that would go, oh my gosh, I've won $35. That's great. That's great. So I
Now
was,
that's my type of audience.
yeah, it wasn't worth trying out for some of the other shows because I knew they'd pass over me because I couldn't pretend that I was jazzed and happy for everyone when they would guess, and happy if they got it right and happy if they got it wrong. No thanks.
I could do that in my own home. Like, yay, you won when
But then
nobody's
who gives
watching.
you anything?
Right. That'd be just a pure joy of watching them do it. I'm like, well, you did it for me, so we're good.
That's it.
That's how I feel because I can't fake that enthusiasm either. That's yeah, that's too much energy for me. I can't do like
It's all, and then similarly, people will invite me to see a play that they're either in or connected with, or if they do stand up, they want me to come see them. And I'm always hesitant because if I'm not enjoying myself, it's very hard for me to paste a smile on my face. And if a comedian is telling jokes, but they don't strike me funnily, I don't humor them by faking laughter. I don't try to keep from smiling or laughing, but I'm just sort of naturally responding to however it hits me. And I don't want to hurt their feelings, but I also like have my own standards where I'm not going to shower them with compliments and pretend to be chuckling or moved or something like that. So I'm not a typical audience member, and a lot of people think, well, they invited you, so you have to show that you're really having a good time. It's like, no, I would rather you not invite me than to put the pressure on me to perform in the audience.
exactly. Everybody got on me about that too, and like, oh, you're so mean. I'm like, not. I'm just. It's not. I don't get it. Like, you know, I can't do it. But
Laugh,
I love.
laugh. It's like saying sneeze, sneeze. It's like that.
Yeah,
It's not
yeah.
there.
I'm like, I can't do it on cue. Yeah, no, that's not gonna happen either. Nope, I totally get it. I understand. You're not gonna get any flack from me, that's for sure. Like,
Good.
be yourself. Like, oh man. So in this, what was your favorite you were talking about in the book? Did you have any favorite moments? Uh
It's sort of like trying to pick a snowflake. So we were talking about snow a while back before we were recording. Picking a snowflake out of a blizzard. There were so many touching or funny or memorable moments, either funny things that he said or getting a compliment from my idol just meant the world to me because, what were the chances I was ever going to meet him, much less be appreciated by him? I mean, one time he handed me a 20 and he said, go down to Tower Records and buy me some music. You know what I like. And it meant a lot to me that he knew that I knew that he liked the Tin Pan Alley song, you know, George Gershwin and Irving Berlin and Cole Porter, all of these people that he knew personally. That was a mind blower to me because he was born in 1890. So I'm talking with someone from a previous century. Um, I mean, he was Victorian in the sense that Victoria was still queen when he was born, even though he was born in New York. But to he was someone who remembered, who could personally remember from before the Wright brothers' flight to after the moon landings, which is just
Wow.
a massive swath of history. And then to have known personally so many, I mean, to have been invited to the White House to meet Eleanor Roosevelt and to know Gershwin and Irving Berlin and W.C. Fields and all of these legendary people that he just knew. And I've always had a real passion for history, so it dovetailed nicely into working for my hero because I not only was interested in hearing his stories about the early days of the act, you know, the rough and tumble days of vaudeville and traveling by train at little theaters where the audience didn't get what they were doing and big time at the studios and then losing his fortune in the stock market crash of 1929. And then there was also just here is a specimen of a 19th century man who witnessed all of these things firsthand that I can only study in a history class. So it really was a remarkable experience for me. Um, the downside was getting close to my hero as he was fading out because he was in ill health and, you know, the clock eventually winds down. He was in his 80s. And also there was this woman named Erin Fleming, who was a younger actress. And it's a common scene, but a younger woman comes in and alienates the friends and family and takes advantage of an elderly man. And the phrase elder abuse wasn't around then, but she was at least verbally and emotionally abusive to him. But he was sort of infatuated with her. So it was a very volatile, delicate relationship because, you know, I would tell people about it and they would say, well, why didn't you just kick her out? Or why didn't you tell him she's bad for him? And it's like, you know, when people are in an abusive relationship, you know, they have to get to that last straw themselves. You can't just say, you know, you should divorce your husband. And she did come along at a time when his family wasn't really interested in looking after him. And he was, you know, old and just kind of rattling around inside his big house in Beverly Hills. He had recently divorced his third wife, and she kind of picked him up and dusted him off and helped put the spotlight back on him by arranging one-man shows and TV appearances and things like that. Are you there? Yes. Oh, good. TV appearances and things like that. And so, you know, one of the themes in my book, Raised Eyebrows, is the color of truth is gray. Because I've heard people say, boy, when I get to be his age, I hope I'm lucky enough to have a young woman like that tending to me. And it's like, well, you may be lucky to have a young woman, but she better not be like that because she will make your last days much rockier than they needed to be. And then you have the other people that say that she was just a horrible person and evil. And then I have to sort of bolster the other side and say, who else was going to look after him? And she did brighten him up and he did enjoy having her around. So you can't just say hero, villain, victim, you know, and it was a lot for me learn and adjust to at the age of 19 and 20, because I had grown up in a pretty middle of the road family. There was never any yelling or slamming of doors or substance abuse or anything like that. And my sisters and I were very well behaved, never got in trouble. And here I am with this woman. I mean, in addition to being difficult, she was mentally challenged in that she was schizophrenic. So she perceived enemies where there weren't any while glossing over real enemies and laughing them off. So she ran hot and cold, and it was just really difficult trying to stay on her good side because you were never sure where that was or how long it would last. So I did a
Right.
lot of growing up. I mean, in addition to the fact that it changed my life to pull me into this world with all of these. I mean, I met people from his era,
Mhm.
and got to spend quality time with them, like at the lunch table, like George Burns and Steve Allen and Jack Lemmon and Bob Hope and
Jack Lemmon, he's one of my favorites. And Walter
Lemon.
Babcock.
Lemon was
No.
great. I got to know Jack Lemmon and spend time with him even after Groucho died. I would stay in touch with him, and then I became associated with talk show host Dick Cavett. And when he would interview Jack Lemmon, I would go along. And I know after Groucho's 84th birthday, almost everyone had left, but my
Mhm.
roommate and I were still there because we didn't want to miss anything. And Jack Lemmon was still there, and he just sat down at the piano and started playing jazz. And my roommate and I
Wow.
just sat on the floor with our legs crossed, watching this great actor who was a really skilled. I think you can find on YouTube, you can find some clips of Jack Lemmon improvising jazz. He was really good, really multi-talented, and just a hell of a nice guy. Um, at that party, Harpo Marx's son, Bill, I overheard him saying to Jack Lemmon, you know, there's so many jerks in this business, but I have to tell you, you are a genuinely nice guy. And Jack Lemmon said, well, thanks, but there's no reason not to be. And I remember at the time thinking it was just sort of a pleasant response. But as the years went by, I thought, it's really true. There's no reason to start out being a jerk as a defensive thing. Um,
Mhm.
you might as well be nice unless that person harms you or betrays you, and then you can get the attitude. And I found that the people who had, I don't think you realize who I am attitudes were the younger stars who came by. And most of them were Aaron Fleming's friends, not Groucho's. The ones who had made it and were legends, like George Burns, was just a sweetheart. There was no star turn thing with him. It was just, I was, you know who George Burns was?
I heard of George Burns. I
You might know him from his later movies like The Sunshine Boys and Oh God, and um, anyway, he too was in vaudeville. He was part of a team with his wife Gracie Allen, Burns and Allen, and they were on radio and television. And
Mhm.
he came to lunch one day, and I was nervous meeting him because I had so much respect for how far back he went. And so the doorbell rang, and I opened it, and he just looked up and he said, "Hi, you want to live a long time? Become an actor. You'll live to be an old man like Groucho and me. Okay, let's eat." And he shuffled into the dining room, and we sat down, and he put us all at ease. Um, but yeah, the older true legends were really cool, and the ones who were just making it or were currently hot were the ones that I'm the only person who was really rude to me, and it kind of fits in with a lot of other people's experiences, was Barbara Streisand.
Really?
Um,
Wow.
it was as if I were transparent. She didn't acknowledge me. If I said something, it fell on deaf ears. She looked past me. It was really kind of annoying because the other people, the other celebrities who would come by, even if they didn't know who I was, this kid that took care of the fan mail and was organizing Groucho's memorabilia, they figured I must belong there, whether I'm Groucho's grandson or for some reason I'm there. So they didn't have that kind of who do you think you are talking to me. But Streisand, it was as if I were invisible. No one else did that. They were all happy to chat about whatever. And it was a remarkable environment for me because I was always welcome at the lunch table. There was no sense of, oh, you're just a worker, you should eat in the kitchen. So no matter who was coming over, or even if no one was coming over, I got to sit and ask Groucho questions about their movies and the people he knew. It was, sort of like at the end of The Wizard of Oz when Dorothy says, I remember some of it wasn't very nice, but most of it was beautiful. So,
Yeah.
watching my hero fade out, which was, you know, I wasn't spared the distance of just being a fan reading the paper or seeing a news bulletin on TV about him being hospitalized. Now it was someone that I knew and who knew me. And I'm right there watching the clock run down. And then, as I say, trying to deal with Aaron Fleming's tempestuous personality. But I wouldn't have
Mm.
traded it for anything. And I had been a history major at UCLA for the first 2 years. I had always had a passion for old movies and had a good sense of humor, but I never thought there was any kind of career in it. Not that history was a magic path to bowls of gold, um, but I finally switched from history to motion picture television major because the magnetic pull into that world was too strong for me to ignore. So after Groucho died in 1977, I went to work at Universal Studios typing scripts every day from 11 to 8 and just pushing them through the Selectric 2 typewriter, which was state of the art, no computers or word processors. And so I would be typing up Columbo and Rockford Files and Kojak and The Bionic Woman and sometimes feature scripts like Animal House and Coal Miner's Daughter. It was and I
I
used to love to walk around. Most of the people I worked around, it was just a job, and they would punch in and type, and then have a lunch hour, and then punch out. And any spare time I had, I went walking all over the place because it was Universal Studios, and there's the Psycho House, and there's the streets where Frankenstein's monster walked down. And I would try to keep up with what guest stars were on some of the shows, and so I got to meet Lauren Bacall when she was on a Rockford File, and I got to meet Fred Astaire on, of all the unlikely things, Battlestar Galactica. He was wearing
wow.
a silver spacesuit because his grandson, it was his grandson's favorite show. And he said, Grandpa, will you be on that show? So Astaire's people got in touch with the producers. And so here is this kind of fairly cheesy science fiction series of the mid 70s. It's one of the rare cases where the remake was better than the original. They resuscitated Battlestar Galactica in the 90s, I think, and I think it was
Mm.
a better quality show than the one that they made at Universal. But yes, there I got to meet
That's pretty
Mr.
cool.
Mr. Top Hat, White Tie, and Tails wearing a silver spacesuit. And then I got into, and then the aforementioned Dick Cavett hired me to come to New York and write for him at HBO. And so I made the quantum leap from secretary to writer. And and then when that dried up, I was invited back to Universal, but to be a writer, which was strange because the woman who was assigned to me as my secretary was someone who had showed me the ropes as a secretary years earlier. So that was kind of surreal. And I freelanced
Wow.
for a while, and I wrote some episodes of Murder She Wrote and Simon and Simon and Sliders and a few other things. And I say I wrote uh, the Raised Eyebrows, My Years Inside Groucho's House. And then my dad had fought in World War II. That was another thing where people were kind of amazed because to them it was so many generations away. I was the baby in the family. I have a sister. One of my sisters is 12 years older than I am, so it's almost generational. But I was the baby, and so my dad was old enough that he had fought in World War II, uh, and in North Africa, Italy, France, and Germany. And he had he had vowed with my mother to write every day, and he almost did. And on days when he couldn't, the next letter would say, "I do you forgive me for not writing? I was stuck in a jeep on a muddy road." And then he would fill her in on what had happened. And so it ended up being like this granular look at being a GI overseas fighting the Nazis. Plus, he was Jewish, and our family was never really deeply religious.
Mhm.
So he was sort of a secular Jew. They didn't observe the holidays or prayers or that sort of thing. But you see in the letters, you watch as the Nazi atrocities and the crimes against Jews and all that sort of thing were being reported, and you see him just get more and more enraged at the injustice, and then sort of getting more in touch with his heritage to the point where he even attended a Passover Seder in a bombed out church in France in 1944 and saved the mimeographed menu of the service, and some of his army buddies signed it. So you get this sort of Jewish filtered look at what it was like to fight the Nazis overseas. And you also get his thumbnail reviews of movies because they would get to see movies in the army camps when things weren't too bad. And so and he and my mom used to love going to movies, and so they would kind of compare notes. And I remember one of them, he said, "I saw To Have and Have Not. I don't think Lauren Bacall has a future. Her voice is too deep. And I think she'll probably do one or more movies, and that'll be it." And another letter, he said, "The movie tonight was nothing to write home about, so I won't." And I thought, what a wonderfully clever way to phrase it. And
Yeah.
he had a crave, you crave. I don't know if you've ever been away to summer camp, and you crave the things you took for granted, like certain cookies or eating at a restaurant. Well, my dad was thousands of miles away from our home in St. Louis, and he was so craving kosher salami. And he wrote my mom saying, "One of the Italian guys here just got a salami from his wife. It's not the kind we like. It's the dried Italian salami, but boy, just the aroma." So mom sent him a salami, and when he got it, he was just jumping up and down. And then as he unwrapped it, his nostrils were filled with this god awful stench because it had rotted in the hold of the ship as it slowly made its way across in the summertime to Europe. So then it became this balancing act of, could she ship it during the right time of year and wrapped properly that it would arrive? And then he would share it with friends and say, "Now I need another salami." so interspersed with all of these things about people being killed and injured and hospitalized, and Hitler's progress, and all the false hopes of saying, I think I'll be home by Christmas. And you look at the date and realize that it has another year before it's over. You get his, please send another salami. And if you can, some dill pickles. I know I know the amount of meat you're allowed is being rationed, and I want you and the baby to have enough. So maybe you should hold off on the salamis. But if you can, I would really appreciate. So I put these letters together. It took a long time. I had to retype them all. They couldn't just be scanned. A lot of them were handwritten and some were typed, but almost all of them were multi-page and really informative. And put it out as a book called Salamis and Swastikas, Letters Home from a GI Jew, because it really, the cultural Jewishness of what he was writing about was just as much a part of it as the fact that he was an American fighting Hitler and the Nazis. So
Wow.
I'm proud of how that turned out. And Woody Allen said of that book, he said, I could never have survived what the man who wrote these letters survived. Being separated from my wife and baby would be just as hard as fighting the Nazis. So they're touching and
Yeah.
funny and interesting. And he goes into detail about the foods they were eating, like what they would have in mess hall, and then if he was invited to someone's house. So you get a real sense of, the exotic things they were given, and sharing them in the letters with mom. Plus, dad also had a sense of history. So for him, he had never, he'd been to a few other states and I think briefly to Canada, but he had never been anywhere out of the United States. And all of a sudden, he's in North Africa and he's in Italy, and there's the Colosseum, and he's in France, and there's the Eiffel Tower and the Palace of Versailles. And so his sense of history was there, plus his historical sense of what he was in the middle of, because he would reflect. He said, when Carol is old enough to study World War II in school, and I'm thinking, you mean you knew it was World War II during World War II? It wasn't in retrospect that they labeled it that. And he said, you'll be able to give Carol an idea of what life was like on the home front, and I'll be able to tell her about my experiences overseas. So he was seeing things in perspective. A lot of political stuff about the elections, and anti-Semitism in some of like the anti-Semitism in France and England, which really surprised him. So
Mhm.
anyway, so I'm proud of Raised Eyebrows as I am of Salamis and Swastikas. And here's my shameless plug. Both are available on Amazon, and Raised Eyebrows is also available in Kindle and audiobook with me doing all the voices and the reading. Or if anyone would like a signed copy, personalized, of course, of either book or both, if you're in a carefree mood, you can order them directly from me at Steve Stoliar, STOLIAR.com, and I will be happy to sign them and send them. But that was my answer to your first question an hour ago. I don't know where I was. I hope it was interesting, but ask me. You feel free to ask me other stuff.
Oh, yeah, no, I mean, I was enjoying the historical pieces. I'm like
Yeah,
you, where that history is just amazing. Just, I mean, after this, I'm gonna have to rewatch this and really, I mean, just really get a sense of that history. Because I am a different generation like
yeah,
too, but I know some of it, but like you mentioned, the coal miner's daughter, I love Loretta Lynn. Like I love her story and all that stuff. So like different things. I was like, huh, wow. Like just
I remember uh, seeing the title page of the script, and it said "Coal Miner's Daughter: The Loretta Lynn Story." And I remember thinking, I know she's popular, but is there really a movie in this? And of course,
mm,
I think she ended up winning Best Actress. And then also another one of the scripts I was typing, and it started out with this old man on a motorcycle zooming through the desert and then crashing, and then this young guy in a truck stopping and helping him into the car. And it was called Melvin and Howard. And I thought, and the old man was Howard Hughes, and the young guy was a guy named Melvin Dumar, who in real life claimed to have had this experience saving Howard Hughes. And I thought, that's this is ridiculous. This will, and I think it won best screenplay Oscar. Um, I remember when I heard that the Blues Brothers was going to be made into a movie, and I
oh,
got on the elevator once, and there was John Landis with his Blues Brothers button, and I said, "How are you going to be able to turn a Saturday Night Live sketch into a feature-length movie?" And he said, "Well, it's the story of Jake and Elwood Blue." Now, of course, that's a favorite movie of a lot of people. I got to meet Cab Calloway on the set of the Blues Brothers. It didn't matter that much about Belushi and Aykroyd, although I loved Aykroyd as my favorite not ready for primetime player. But
mhm.
meeting Cab Calloway was a big deal to me because I loved his sound from the Betty Boop cartoons and from the records in the 30s and all the Minnie the Moocher, Heidi Ho stuff. So you never know how something's going to turn out. In the 80s, Dick Cavett was out here working on a movie, and he called me up and said, "You want to come down to the set and we'll hang out?" So I went to the set and I met Tom Hanks, who was a really, and everyone says this because it's true, he too is a really nice guy. There's no attitude, no star thing. And I couldn't tell from the scene I watched them shoot if the movie was going to be any good or not. But I knew for a fact, once again, my uncanny instinct, that they were never going to leave the title Forrest Gump, because that was just such a preposterous title. And I knew that Andy Gump was a company that made chemical toilets. And I thought, that's got to just be temporary. I didn't realize it had come from a novel of the same name. So I thought, whether this is any good or not, there's no way that stupid title will last. And of course, it was Best Picture and God knows what else.
Yeah, but it's on memes and everything. Oh man, that's pretty cool. So Forrest Gump, I mean, a lot of people thought it was a real, off of a real person or anything like that. So what was that actually from? Just
Well, there's a scene in the movie where Forrest appears on the Dick Cavett show in the 70s. And so um, I'm blanking on the director's name. Oh, well, this is what happens when you become a living fossil like me. Um, uh, he had such attention to detail that he had them recreate the set to the Cavett show right down to the shade of fabric on the chairs, and then with Cavett's shirt and tie, they made sure that it matched the shirt and tie because they were going to intercut from when John Lennon was on Cavett's show for real, and then they had a John Lennon look-alike who, and he and Forrest Gump were going to be on the Dick Cavett show. And I think they ended up only using the real clip of Lennon, but they dubbed in the words to fit the script, and then Forrest Gump was there on the show. So it was strange to see the old Dick Cavett show set up us from years earlier. But it was really cool, and Hanks and I traded off doing impressions. I remember one of the crew members was from the South and was working with him on his accent, and I remember him trying to get Hanks to say church for church. We stood,
Uh-huh.
we learned that in church, and back and forth with this crew member who was really from the South saying, no, it's church. Church? No, church. Okay. Anyway, just one of many fragments of experiences I've had along the way.
That's pretty cool. I mean, you said you were an old fossil, but honestly, I'd say that's a good thing, really, because the amount of stuff that you've
Well, it's
seen and been.
interesting. It, it's interesting because when I was working for Groucho and I was, 20, his old writer friends would meet me and they would think, you have no idea who any of us old guys are, do you? And then I would say, yes, you're Nat Perrin. You worked on Monkey Business and Horse Feathers. You're Irving Brecker. You wrote a day at the circus and Go West. And they were startled that this kid in tennis shoes and blue jeans and t-shirt knew who they were. And it kind of gave them uh, a sense that maybe we all weren't just pot smoking hippies listening to loud rock and roll music. So now I just turned 70 and run into people who say, uh, my granddaughter was watching Monkey Business and laughing at Harpo. And it's like now I'm one of those old guys saying, it warms the cockles of my heart to hear that kids today appreciate. Right? Or the experiences that I had at Universal, like I was telling you, typing scripts and wandering around. That to me was this job. I wasn't that impressed with the then current. I didn't care about Lindsay Wagner or Robert Blake, but the guest stars from the golden age mattered to me. But now when I rattle off the names of the shows or shows that I wrote for, people will say, "Oh, I loved that show when I was a kid." Or I remember that. And it's like, yes, now you're like I was meeting them and saying, I watched your show when I was a kid in the 50s. So it's just what happens when you manage to avoid dying young. There's
Yeah.
friend of mine who's older than I am who said to me recently, let's face it, we're at an age where no matter what happens to us, it won't be early onset. And it kind of it sent a chill through me because I thought, oh God, you're right. And I told my sister that, and she said, yeah, if you get hit by a car, the paper will say elderly man struck in crosswalk. So it's all relative. But
The onset.
yes, there's no such thing. Yeah, it's true. I went to my high school. Oh God, this makes me feel old. A couple of years ago was the 50th anniversary of my high school graduation,
Wow,
which
not many people make it there.
my memories of high school are so vivid that I remember my locker combination and the combination to my gym locker, which are of no use to me. And I wish I could trade them out for things that I really want to remember, like where I left my keys or what I was supposed to do tomorrow. But uh, in at the reunion, first of all, there's that jolt of who are all these old people, you know, people that have a walker or are bald with white hair, or the women that have had so much work done they look like wax figures, and it's like, oh my God, I'm their peer. And then I would look at the name tag and go, no, you can't be Janine. No. But by the time of our reunion, 10% of our class had died. And since there were 1,100 people in our senior class, that meant that 110 people had died from my high school. And at first, I remember thinking, oh my God, that's awful. It's like some plague swept through us. And then my friends and I were talking, and it's like, well, no, if people have gotten into their late 60s, and you hear about like someone having a heart attack or getting cancer in their 60s, you think, well, okay, he was in his. It's like, but I don't want that to apply to me. No, that was the other 70-year-old people, but I'm too young.
Right.
So, yeah, there is no early onset when you're 70 because that, I mean, in earlier days, I would be considered a, really just a walking fossil. But we live longer now and take better care of ourselves, hopefully.
Yeah. But in a positive light, out of 1,100 people, 110, not many people, or not many, your guys' generation age. Um, I've met some people that like their whole class minus two people, just like two people are still alive.
Wow. Yeah, well, I'm
You
a
know what I
boomer. I'm
And you
from the
guys,
middle of the boomer generation.
yeah, and you guys, your class is still kicking, I mean, like,
And I have,
but
Woody Allen is uh 88 and will be 89 soon. Dick Cavett is 87 and will be 88 soon. Very hard for me to realize that because back when I was working for Groucho, he'd be interviewed and he'd say, "Are there any young comedians that you like today?" And he would say, "Woody Allen and Dick Cavett." And now
wow.
they're in they're older than Groucho got. Groucho died when he was 86, but he was an old 86. His arteries and strokes and things like that. But Cavett and Woody are in much better shape. But, combination of lifestyle, genetics, and the luck of the draw.
And becoming a bus driver instead of being hit by the bus.
Yes, very wise.
Yeah, let's just become the bus driver instead. Like, shoot, why not? And, I mean, going through all those generations, I don't even know how to ask that because you've seen, I mean, different changes within not just the industry, but just in life. Is there a favorite generation, like era that you personally liked, that you would love to go back to, or the change?
That's the premise of so many science fiction movies and Twilight Zones and that sort of thing. It seems there are, as with getting back to the color of truth is gray, it seems that with any period, there's some dark undercurrent that's a mitigating. It's like I wouldn't want to live at a period when there wasn't central air conditioning because that would defeat me. Um, if you're asking about periods of my life, I mean, I lost my mother when I was 15. So going back to around then, I'd be itching for a big loss if it collided with that time. I was happily married for 17 years, but my wife died. And so that has a dark thing attached to it. Periods when I was out of money. Um, I mean, the Groucho years were great, but there was still the stress of dealing with Aaron Fleming's rages and Groucho's mortality. So it's like, I think, without thinking too hard, I can think, oh, maybe the early 80s when I was living in New York and discovering and being a writer, and that's sort of in the running. But
Mm.
that was still only 2 or 3 years, and I ended up being needing money and temping for a while after being a writer, which was really tough on my soul. Going back to saying, you need 3 copies of this by 4 o'clock. Okay, I'll get right on that. So I don't know. I don't, historically, I'm sure, be annoyed by the inconveniences. Um, and then in terms of my own life, there were, little patches of happy, fun, interesting times, but there was always some dark other thing going on that I would remember if I spend any time thinking really clearly about going back to that period. So that's the best I can give you.
Okay. Well, what would you want to impress on the the people nowadays? Something that, like, I know we're all going to go one day, but something that you would leave on this earth that you would love the people to know or to have, anything, the nuggets,
My
whatever.
best advice is never take anyone's advice because you never know. And because your path, there's people who say, well, you want to know how to be successful in Hollywood, do this. Or if you wanted to, and it's like that may have been your experience, but don't dismiss another person's right to have their own. It may involve taking the machete and slashing through the underbrush to get from A to B to C, but figure it out for yourself and try not to sabotage yourself by thinking that'll never work out or what's the point or I'm not good enough. Give it a shot, and you never know how things could turn out. How's that?
That works. I mean, yeah, and being a fan. Do you have any advice about being, like, you said earlier in the conversation that you were a fan of
Yeah,
Mr.
well,
Marx and
I
everything?
mean, I've gotten a lot of people's autographs. I've struck up correspondences with some interesting people, and I try not to impose. I try to find, if someone's about to have a fork full of food, that's probably not a good time to go over and talk to them. I also try to think of something that's a little different than what they're used to hearing all the time. Like
Mhm.
I was introduced to Ray Bradbury, and you know who that is?
No.
He was like one of the top science fiction writers of the 20th century. And so when I was introduced to him, I went, "Oh my God, Ray Bradbury. Weren't you a contestant on You Bet Your Life with Groucho Marx?" And he threw his head back and laughed because no one ever brought that up. They all said, "Oh, the Illustrated Man, the Martian Chronicles, they changed my life." Da, 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 da. And he laughed, and because he was a contestant on You Bet Your Life, but I knew that because of my. So it's cool to do something to the left or right of. Here's some more name dropping. Um, Jay Leno is a friend of a mutual friend of ours. So I met him some years back, and we were talking about, I was telling him about encounters with fans when I was with Dick Cavett and how
Mhm.
those can go amusingly or frustratingly. And Leno said he was having the same discussion with Garth Brooks, the country singer. And he said Garth told him that he was on tour and he was eating in a restaurant alone. And afterwards, he went into the bathroom, into one of the stalls, and locked it and sat down. And as soon as he sat down, he hears on the door,
Oh,
and he figures, oh, did I leave my wallet or my charge card? So he leaned forward and undid the latch a little bit, and a hand thrust in a piece of paper and a pencil, and a man's voice said, "I didn't want to bother you while you were eating."
are you? Oh my gosh.
Which it makes a strange sort of sense, but it's true that fans will often not have a sense of propriety about that sort of thing. It's a
Uh,
great story, but that's how that's sort of fan brain. Oh, I'm not going to bug him, but he's just sitting here. He's not doing anything really. Now I'll get his autograph. And one of the stories I told him was when I was living in New York, Dick Cavett and I went to a coffee shop and we were eating, and a man came over and just said to Cavett, "Sorry to bother you. Just wanted to let you know I'm a big fan." And Cavett said, "Thanks." And then a woman came over and she said, "I was watching that man come over here and start talking to you as if he knew you. And I realized it must be terrible to be famous because perfect strangers come over and just start talking to you while you're trying to enjoy a meal with your friend." And she spent forever talking about how terrible. And I'm I have my hand over my mouth and I'm laughing and turning purple and perspiring, trying to hold in my laughter like you learn how to do in the back of class when the teacher
It,
says something. And I'm thinking,
yeah.
I can't make eye contact with Cabot or I'll lose it. And she just spent all this time saying it just must be such a drag to have to put up with people like that man that came and left. And then she left and I was able to let it out and he and I just laughed at that.
Oh man, yeah, that's where I would be pulling interference. Like, oh, okay, somehow I'll end up with a job being security because, like, like just I would be doing the same thing too. Like, really, but yet you're sitting here 5 hours later, like, excuse me, ma'am, thank you. Like, let's move it on. Move. Like,
Well, my
uh,
dear, this was most enjoyable. I hope you found it interesting.
oh,
And I
absolutely.
hope your viewers and listeners are likewise interested.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I really enjoyed learning about this stuff, and
Sure.
and and I know I'm younger. I'm pulling different generations here, but I enjoy hearing about the different things. And now I'm gonna definitely buy the books and really
Oh, thank you.
and I'm gonna buy it through the website stuff because I do want the autograph.
Oh, thanks.
But
And also I'm not one of those people that a lot of my peers get really upset when someone younger says I don't know who that is. But it's like, why would you? It was 50 years before I knew who they or after I knew who they were. And there's so much information out there. There was no internet when I was a kid, and we had ABC, NBC, CBS, and Channel 28, the educational channel, and that was our choice of television. So, people now will say, but all they have to do is go to YouTube and press play, and they can see a Marx Brothers movie or Fred Astaire. And it's like, yeah, but you're asking them to watch an old black and white movie with references to people they don't know, and they're so used to color and fast editing and all this, and so I mean, the same way that if you said, I can't believe you can't rattle off 3 Taylor Swift songs, everybody knows Taylor Swift song, and I wouldn't be able to
I
do
can't
it.
either. Like,
Well, now I'm ashamed of you. No, but the same sort of thing where I don't, it's like whatever your frame of reference is fine. And if it interests you, I'll tell you what you
yeah,
want to know. And if it doesn't interest you, I won't try to force it into your brain saying, you should know these things. You should know
yeah,
about these movies, whatever, music. Anyway, I thank you
yeah. For
for
me
a
about it,
pleasant
and
chat.
yeah. Yeah, and I love thank you for the historical pieces because
Sure.
the other generations need to know that, and it's a piece, that could be placed into YouTube has probably will have a vault somewhere along the way,
Sure.
and the generations are dying off, and we won't have that anymore. We'll have some weird
I'm
situation.
still there.
Yeah, yeah, but we get the stories straight from
That's
the
right.
the
After
horse's
I'm
mouth.
gone, someone can press play and I'm alive again. So,
Yeah, and I
well,
mean
on that macabre
that's
note,
why
I thank
I
you
thank you.
and have a pleasant day and evening.
Thank you. You too.
All right. Take care.
Thanks. You too.